Okay, so making our snowflake wine glass. First step is to put your wine glass upside down and hold it by the stem. And I'm going to start at the neck of the wine glass, right where that stem comes in there. And just work some nice paint up onto my brush, make sure there's no excess water. And as I'm pulling the cup away from my brush stroke, that helps me to get a smooth flow of my line. I'm going to keep going around this wine glass till I end up with about 5 or 6 swirls, however many you think looks right for what you're going for. Don't be too caught up on how perfect the swirls look. You're really not going to notice them. They're just kind of a background accent. I'll try to make sure there's at least one loop in each swirl. Okay, now what I'm going to do then is go in with my silver. Remember to wash out your brush really well and dry it off. You don't want that extra water on your brush because it will drip and then make your paint go places you don't want it to go. So with the glitter, I'm just going to do the same thing inside of those white loops, adding some glitter loops. And the glitter barely shows up. When it dries, it'll be totally clear, except for, of course, the little sparkle. So really just gonna not worry too much about how it looks, just trying to make sure I start at the base of that stem neck there and bring it at least 3/4 of the way down my glass. You can see how I'm kind of turning the bottle away from my brush stroke. Helps me to just pull that line a little nicer and smoother. You can add as many of these little swirls as you want to. I always try to pull them away at the bottom of the swirl so that we get a nice little point there. Okay. If you have places where you get a little bit too much paint, just take your really clean, really dry brush and you can kind of smooth out any of those little extra blobs of paint as long as the paint's still wet. Okay, so now I have my swirls. Now I'm going to flip this over. And the next step is to add some snowflakes. Feel free to look at your little handout if you need some guidance on how to create basic snowflakes. Okay, for me, I always go with the old kind of crisscross applesauce we say at school. Make a little cross, go through that cross with an X. And this is how I start my basic snowflake. Okay. After you have your basic snowflake, you can add the little details on the edges. You can go for like a little V. You can see I just did that right there. I'm going to go to each tip of my snowflake and make a arrow pointing down. Notice how I actually start on the outside of the snowflake. So I go to the side and then pull it towards the snowflake. And remember, they're snowflakes. They're not all perfect. They don't all need to be perfect. We don't want them to be perfect. Just have fun with it. Okay, you can do a lot of extra detailing and stuff later if if something turned out the way you don't want it to. After you have some branches and you have your base, then you can take the end of your paintbrush, dip it in the paint, and add some nice little dot details to finish off that snowflake. Really nice way to get a little crisp detail on there and very user-friendly. Okay, nice little basic snowflake there. You want to make sure you have several snowflakes. I'm only going to probably do a couple in this video, but try and alter the size. If you have a big one, try and make a smaller one next to it. Try and go for some medium ones. It will look more realistic if you have various sizes. Okay, so this one is the same kind of design where I start with a crisscross. Okay, and then I'm going to go in there and add some dots or branches. Okay, let's show you another type of snowflake that I like to make. Pretty simple one. I'm going to take and I'm going to make a circle to start with. And then I'm going to make little heart shapes. So to make a heart, I just make a circle, and then right next to that circle, I make another little circle. It doesn't need to be a heart that has a point. It's just the top part of the heart. Kind of like two diagonal ovals that are going towards each other. Okay. And so whenever I'm making a snowflake, I'm thinking about kind of the fact that it's a square, so that there should be 4 sides of it. And that sort of helps me to plan my design so that if there were an imaginary square here, my little snowflake would be touching all 4 sides at some point in the pattern. It's just something I like to do to help guide my design and keep it symmetrical. Okay. So now you can go ahead and add other, you can, now that you have that center, just kind of keep building off of it. I wasn't really planning on turning that into like a long heart, but my line sort of went wonky, so like we're just gonna go with it. So now it has this another little heart there on the end. You got to really watch where your hand is. As you can see, I'm holding the stem and kind of holding this horizontal towards my table. That's probably, for me, the easiest way to be able to hold your glass, but also still paint, because your swirls are still going to be slightly tacky at this point. Okay, so now I'm going to go in there with my trusty little handle of my brush and just add some dots to the ends of those little lines. Just a nice way to crisp those edges if you didn't like the way they turned out. Real simple. Go ahead and do another little one up here. Boop. Boop. You probably won't have the sound on because there'll be too much noise, but if you do, just hopefully this kind of helps. So there I have another little one, different design, more built from the circle and then adding shapes around it. Whereas the other one is, again, that cross and X overlapping, and then with the little V's going down the branches. Okay, so you would go ahead and keep adding snowflakes so you have various sizes around your glass. Next thing I'm going to do is add my accent color. You guys have blue or red for an option. You could do any color. You can have 2 choices here. You basically can use the blue out of the bottle if that's what you're most comfortable with. You can also mix the blue with the white to get a lighter blue. If you see in my example, that's kind of what I did. And then I used both the light blue and the dark blue. Again, whatever works the best for you. Here I've kind of mixed up a light blue and a dark blue. If you mix it up, make sure you kind of mix up a decent portion. I use the ratio of about 50-50. But it doesn't really matter, whatever you think looks like the right blue for you. Just make sure you mix it really nicely so that it's fully combined. And now I'm going to go in there with my accent color, whether that is a color you use from your palette or a color you just mixed up. And now that I already have the basic snowflake, I'm just going to add to it. So adding some smaller lines inside some of the bigger lines. You could also use the end of your handle here if you wanted to do some dots. Okay, so there's my light blue. I'm going to go in with the dark blue and do some dots on there. And again, you don't have to do dots, but if it works well for you, then go for it. Okay. I'm just going to keep working your way around. I'm just holding onto the stem here and rotating it. And again, holding it sort of horizontal and parallel to the table. Okay. You can just go right over top of your snowflake and add blue lines to it if you want. Okay. Okay, there's a little light blue, and I just retrace that X shape. Okay. If you ever feel like a line is something you don't really like, there's that one little stem there that's kind of a little bumpy. You just either choose to like let it go because, hey, it's handmade and, you know, that's fine. Or you can take the brush that's very clean with a slight tiny bit of water, like very little bit of water. And you can kind of pick up that part that you didn't like. And then as you can see, I'm picking it up and I'm also drying the brush off. So as long as it hasn't fully dried, it's very, very easy to kind of wipe it away. You get too much on there, take a bigger brush and treat it like a sponge and soak it up and pull it away. Okay, there, a little better. Okay, so again, just with your accent color, adding dots, dashes, other things you'd like to add to your snowflake. Whenever you are happy with that, I'm gonna go in with your glitter color. And again, you don't have to add glitter. If you want it to be less sparkly, that's up to you. I tend to love the sparkles, so I go with that. But now what I'm gonna do is just add some sparkled details, again, in between my branches that I already have. Keep in mind it will dry clear, so you know, you'll just see the sparkles at some point. It has a little bit more of an opacity to it while it's wet. Okay. And the glitter, although I love the way it looks, it does not move as nicely as the regular paints, probably because of the glitter component in there. So I think the best way to add it if you're worried about like messing up your really nice lines is to go again with that end of the brush handle trick. And then you can just nicely dot it on to something that's already there. And you don't have to worry about the fact that it's kind of clumpy. So I'm just gonna add a little glitter dot to the edge of my snowflake dots that are already there. But again, if you're feeling like you didn't really like the way it moved, because it is kind of clumpy because of that glitter part, that's a nice way to use it. Just dot it in there. And just put a little nice little center dot on the snowflake there. Okay. So you guys go ahead and keep working on this. Obviously, this is going to take you longer than it's taking me since I'm only doing about half. Now, the next step then, after you have your snowflakes, you've added some glitter dots, you know, keep going till you're happy with it. Feel free to add as many snowflakes as you want. I'm going to stand this up here. I'm going to adjust this quick. Okay. And I'm going to actually flip this over just for the camera so you guys can see better. And you're gonna go in with whatever color you want. I tend to like to use my accent color because I already used that in the snowflake and it just kind of rounds out the design nicely. I'm gonna start right at the nape of the neck there, right at where the stem comes together to the glass. I'm gonna start by just getting a nice little edge there and I'm turning it around with my handle. And then I'm going to paint upwards. Don't be worried if it looks streaky on this first step. You're going to have to do 2 coats of whatever your accent color is that you want to use here. If it's red, if it's blue, you're going to need to do 2 coats. You're going to bring it all the way down. Try and keep your brush strokes vertical. Okay? And then once you have that totally done, you can kind of set it on your table and then continue painting the base. Okay, again, I try to keep brush strokes going vertical and you don't want to overdo it. That's probably the trickiest thing with doing just a solid back like this, is just keep your brush strokes going in the same direction. And then once it feels like it's starting to kind of clump up, you need to move on to another section. And just know you're going to have to do 2 coats if you want it to look solid and nice. Okay. All right, so last thing I want to show you, here's one that I already have done the 2 coats on. You can see it's nice and solid. And here's my little snowflakes. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Oh, see how sparkly? So now the glitter has dried, and so you just see the sparkles. Okay. If you want, again, totally up to you, what you feel comfortable with, you can certainly add more snowflakes or polka dots or whatever you think sounds super fun to your base color. You need to let it dry 10 minutes in between each time. It's a lot easier to paint snowflakes on the base because it's flat. Okay, so you can do that, certainly. You could just take the end and add some polka dots. You could just decide you don't want to add anything else and you want it to just have the snowflakes on the glass. Okay, certainly whatever you're most comfortable with. I'm gonna add some little boops, boop. Okay, and I could always add some glitter over top again too, just like I did on the other one. Up to you guys, doing some cross ones there. And do little dots there. It does pop nicely against that dark blue background for this little step. Again, I'm going to kind of make them sporadic, so I'm going to have one going off of the base, just kind of disappearing there. Okay. Try one with maybe more of a thick, kind of solid look to it. And if you've ever seen snowflakes in real life, they are all different. So one does not have to match the other. It's more fun if they don't, because it's trickier to make something look the same twice. It's much easier to make two different things that look similar but are not exactly the same. Okay, do some little crossies. Crisscross, crisscross. Okay. All right, and just kind of keep going around and you can keep filling up the stem. Make sure you just don't touch it and probably make sure it dries for at least 20 minutes before you guys wrap them up and take them home. You might need to possibly carry it upside down depending on how long your stem has had time to dry. So, all right, thank you guys. Hope that this helped. Have a wonderful night.